Hello, hello, welcome to the Circle of Fame. We have never known more about health, so why are we getting sicker? Welcome everyone to the Expert Conversations. Medical science has achieved extraordinary breakthroughs. We have advanced technology, better treatments, and more health knowledge than ever before. Yet, chronic disease, obesity, diabetes, mental health challenges, and burnout continue to rise. So, today we want to explore a very important question: why is this happening, and what can we do about it? Our goal is not simply to talk about illness. We want to understand the root causes, challenge some common assumptions, and most importantly, explore how we can create healthier futures through prevention and better informed choices. That is why we've brought together experts with different perspectives and experiences today. I'm also delighted to be joined by Vangelis Kalogirou, who will help me moderate our conversation. Thank you, Vangelis, and thank you to all experts for sharing your knowledge with us today. And before we begin, I would like Vangelis to start, and everyone briefly introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Elena. Well, welcome everyone to our Circle of Fame panel discussion. My name is Vangelis, and I will be your host and moderator today. And as Elena said, I'd like to just go around the room and have everyone take about 30 seconds to introduce themselves. Dr. Larry, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Dr. Larry Waldman. I call it semi-retired clinical forensic psychologist based in Phoenix, Arizona. I had a very diverse practice, and I speak on practice management around the country and on innovative methods of marketing and practice. At the same time, I'm also a certified trainer, physical trainer, and yoga instructor, and I do teach a couple of yoga classes each week.
Perfect. Sabina?
I'm Dr. Sabine O'Loughlin, and I am a pathologist during the day and a functional wellness coach and all the other free times. But I was inspired by death as my mother died when I was 20, and inspired by death, I studied life. So I got into all kinds of adjunct modalities, bioenergetics, Pilates, functional movement patterns. And the more I studied death, the more I got interested in life. I never could switch from one to the other. It wasn't this or that. It's always been this and that. So and I'm originally from Germany, so that gives a kind of a maybe direct perspective that is a little bit too direct for some folks, but that's how it is. It's the directness.
Excellent. Tony?
Good morning or good evening. My name is Tony Rodolfo Benson, and I am a registered nurse. I left my 20 years of biotech job about 2 years ago after I experienced a season of losses. So it's been, I lost my mom, my brother, and my best friend in less than a year, about 2 years ago. And after that, I pivoted my life into doing other things. I became a grief educator, not to be, to fix other people, but to understand what the grief that I was going through. But now I became more of like somebody that really helps other people in their grief. I just did recently a TEDx talk on compounding grief.
Okay.
And I am also a 500-hour certified yoga teacher, a Reiki master, and as well as a sound healer. Did 100 hours of sound healing and just learning all of these modalities to kind of become a holistic practitioner. And I'm also a life and work coach.
Excellent. Excellent. Elena?
I am Elena Apalkova, founder of Mindset to Results and the Circle of Fame, international speaker and mindset and success mentor. My work focuses on human potential, particularly how our mindset, identity, and the decisions we make influence the results we create in our lives. I created the Circle of Fame to bring experts with different perspectives together, share knowledge that matters, and turn that knowledge into conversations that can create a lasting impact. And for today's discussion, I am especially interested in exploring the connection between personal responsibility, mindset, lifestyle, and the choices we make about our long-term well-being.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I spent over 40 years in the technology corporate world and moving energy. You're speaking all this stuff, data from one place to the other. And I also am a Reiki level 3 and also a Reiki master. So I do energy in both aspects. It's kind of interesting. So let's get started. And to our guests, each of you are participating in this panel because we feel that you share from your lived experiences. And as we move through the questions, each of you will have about 2 minutes to respond. And I invite you to speak from those experiences, share the moments that shaped your perspective and the lessons that changed the way you think and the insights that emerged through the practice rather than just the theory. And for those of us joining today and listening to this recording, instead of simply just collecting the information, listen for the moments where you recognize yourself in someone's story. Many times we listen to things and we think, well, I already know this topic. But I invite you to listen with a mind that is open to new perspectives, a different angle from which to see. And our goal is that this conversation will become more than just a panel discussion. Ask yourself, what can I take away from what I have heard today? And start making lasting changes in my life and in my health. So the first question is, despite remarkable advances in medicine and healthcare, why do you believe so many people are becoming less healthy? And from your experience, what are the biggest factors driving this trend? And maybe you can even define what is health, because people have different definitions, and who is doing the defining. So who would like to start?
I can start. Yeah. I do believe that there's a lot of stress and burnout in our society nowadays. And one of the things that I'm focusing is about teaching resilience, because I believe that a lot of people are working a lot, working too much sometimes. And I experienced that. I worked in the hospitals and I worked in the corporate world where I was sitting long hours in front of the computer and never getting up until the sun goes down. I eat on my desk. I don't interact a lot with my coworkers because I just have to keep my head down. And I experienced that working for nearly 20 years in the corporate world. And sometimes there's no time to go to the gym. There's no time to go out, or we don't allow ourselves to go out into the sun, take a walk, take a nice breath outside, or cook our own meals. And we pour our time working in front of the computer or in our job, because a lot of people need to make a living. And it's understandable that a lot of people are worried about their jobs as well. And so the more that they perform, and when there are layoffs in a company, they absorb all those work that has been reduced. And so to me, there's sometimes the companies are not bringing awareness about health, and people are just have become a workforce, right? And they just continue to work. And some of the big companies may have some health and wellness awareness in their company, but at the same time, do they really practice? Sometimes it's more of a soundbite. It's more of an attraction to bring people in, but once the people are working, they're not doing all of those things or using those benefits. And that has been my personal experience.
Perfect. Excellent. Madeline, I know you just joined us. Why don't you take 30 seconds and introduce yourself, and then I'll repeat the question so you can answer it. There you go.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I'm late. I was in a meeting and I was rushing to get here. I'm so desperate to also meet others and hear your opinions about these wonderful questions. I'm a doctor in metaphysical science and a pranic healer. I work on a mind, body, and soul level. I come from the business world where I was a former director of a top 10 company. So I do know about the injuries when you fly high and you perform, you're a high performer. So I help clients these days to identify why they block and why they're feeling that they cannot move forward and how to break through those blockages, identify the root of their problem, and change the behavior thereafter to overcome and to become who they want to be. And that's my introduction.
Perfect. And so our question is, despite all these remarkable advances in medicine and healthcare, what are your ideas as to why you think people may be becoming less healthy? What do you think are some of the biggest factors?
Medicine's become extraordinarily good at treating disease, but we have not necessarily become equally good at creating lives in which people can flourish. So we are starting to treat chronic stress as normal. And that's one of the problems, is clients accept it and they go on pills and potions and they just live with it as normal. So it becomes worse because the root of the problem has never been discovered or identified. And if you do not identify the root, you cannot change anything. So we've become better at managing illness than managing ourselves. We've become better at managing illness than preventing the illness. And modern life frequently disconnects people from the fundamentals of human well-being. It disconnects them from movement because they sit behind their desk all day. Then they go home and they're overloaded with the next load of responsibilities. So they don't go out into nature and move and spend time or take the necessary breaks in between. They don't eat well, they eat on the run. So they don't sleep well because they're overstressed. And they don't develop meaningful relationships anymore, where they can just sit and have a meaningful and deep conversation with others that feeds the soul, because they are so addicted to the screen and everything has to happen in a minute or 2 minutes, and then they lose interest. They lost their sense of purpose, and they also lost the emotional regulation. That's so part of the human being, because now they're relying on outside sources to do that for them. So we've basically lost a bit of us in the process. And I believe that humanity is in this void, and they're getting used to be in the void and not doing anything to overcome that and to become and flourish as a human being.
Perfect. I like the fact that you brought us what people are starting to think normal is. I think that's very, very key because, oh, that's just normal. Well, not really. Thank you for bringing that up. Dr. Larry.
Thank you. As a psychologist, it may seem strange to mention this, but I've always had this feeling that we as human beings might be wearing out our warranty, if you will. Let's face it. Early man and women, of course, if they lived to 40, that was huge, and so on. And now with the benefits that we have. Of course, we're now living, life. Typically, the life expectancies are in the 70s. Although interestingly, they haven't been advancing very much of late. So even under perfect conditions, how long can we exist? But saying that, of course. Getting back into the area that I'm, of course, comfortable with, is lifestyle, which we've talked about here. That's I think the greatest enemy, and that includes a whole host of things. Certainly, the stress that has been emphasized here as well, but we know smoking, excessive drinking. will definitely shorten your life and make your life miserable even while you are still alive, and so on. Obesity. I speak to a lot of seniors. My yoga is aimed at working with seniors, and so on, and done a fair amount of research. I mean, over 50% of seniors across this country are obese. We have that issue, of course, and the fact of being sedentary. Um, uh, we have a lot of these factors that come into play, and so despite the fact that there's great medical advances, a lot of us aren't very happy, and aren't living as long and as well as we should.
I think it's great that you brought up how even though people are living longer, what is the quality of life of that extra years? So, Elena, you want to take a couple of seconds and give us an idea of what your thoughts are?
Yeah, definitely. I also think that there is the cause and effect, right? And people forget about this. Everything what we have in life has the cause, and cause is ourselves. Although medicine can develop, but still our outcome, whatever it comes from us. And what I wanted to mention here is our awareness. I believe that the big problem is that people are not aware, and they take for granted when they are healthy. They think or believe that or they live like they have 5,000 years agreement to live, and they don't think that it can happen with them. They look at other people and see them sick, but they don't think that they can get sick, and this is how they continue neglecting themselves. And also this level of awareness, it is not at that place where they get serious about their health when they are healthy. And also all what you mentioned, stress and anxiety, which is very popular now, and it become a norm of the life. And of course, before, people were more connected with the nature. There were different herbs, right? Like people were taking and preventing the worsening of their health. But now we live in such a fast world. Everybody want just fast solution, right? Like they get sick, it is much easier to just take a medicine which is chemical, and just to stop symptoms, and then pretend that they don't have any problems, right? And this is how the diseases from acute form, which it can be treatable faster if they are addressed in early stages, they go to chronic form, and then it is more difficult to address later. But people really, I would say, neglect themselves, and they think that somebody else will take care of them, like doctors. And when we look at the medical system, there are so many sick people that doctors don't even have time to really search and examine the person holistically and look for the root which can cause this disease. They easily just give people medicine which they have according protocol, and they know just which symptoms, which medicine to prescribe, and it is very easy solution. So I think that the problem is that everyone now is looking for easy solution and neglecting themselves, instead of really loving themselves and cherish what they have, good health, and not take it for granted.
I think that's very important because I started stretching when I was 18, when I started working out and doing things, and my whole life, but I didn't know that. I just was something that just happened. So I think that's a very key piece, Alina. All right, let's go to the next question. Which lifestyle, environmental, or societal changes have had the greatest impact on our health over the past few decades? Consider things like, nutrition, stress, technology, environmental factors, work relationships, all those type of things. What do you think are the biggest impacts that have been there? Tony, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, knowledge is now within our grasp. there's so many things. People are going to social media for information, like Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. And sometimes, we just have to think that we know that not all the information you read out there is something that's reliable. And there's also generational gaps, right? And so I think for us is really to continue looking for what source we're seeking those information. And people like us, like nurses and doctors and experts, need to continue speaking out and educating people about where the information. And I think from what I heard, the new generation is now more skeptical of where they're getting the information, which is kind of hopeful, because now they're really deciphering who to believe and not to believe. And I think there's still a lot of gaps out there that needs to be filled in.
Very, very good. Yes, because when we don't even know what the source is, then how can we verify or validate it? I think that's very, very important. Madeline, why don't you come next?
Although the information that's out there might not always be the best information out there for people when they Google themselves or Google what's wrong with them, at least they are getting information and they can start to compare it, and they not only have a doctor to listen to and make a one-sided decision. So I see that. I just wanted to throw that in here. I see it as a bit of a positive, because I believe the more information people take in, the better for them, and the more educated decision they can make. But lifestyle changes that had the greatest impact on society at the moment, as I see it and experience it, is, of course, COVID changed everything. The shock of COVID, the aftershock of COVID, and the lifestyles of everybody changed. And it's also like people lost the connection to themselves thereafter. It's like they don't care, and they wait until it's too late and they're in a corner before they actually even seek help or start to speak about it. And that is quite a worrying effect. And then, of course, the stress factor that adds to it, depriving of, a lot of people are complaining that they can't sleep, so they don't get enough sleep. The food's not the greatest at the moment that we buy in the shops. And then the lack of movement again. These factors all contribute to lifestyle changes that's affecting every single one, every person's health, their mind, their body, and their soul. So it's a combination of everything together, and we need a total lifestyle change to become healthier.
I think a lot of people, you mentioned something, we've lost the connection to ourselves. I think that's very, very, very important, because I know I did. I lost connections to my emotions, my feelings, and so forth, because the mind, body, the spirit, and the soul, all that, we don't realize we're not just one thing. We're all of those together, mixed. Very good. Thank you, Mal. Sabina.
Well, I agree with this. Like, the thing that makes the most difference to me is to be able to be where you are. And that sounds really kind of simple and not very easy, because what exactly are we talking about here? Like I say to myself, my motto is kind of, every moment is an opportunity to be curious about what's possible and how to know when it's just right for you. That may sound simplistic, but this just right for you is not something that people can really tap in very easily. You have all these things, as we were saying, healthcare is actually disease care. We find things that are wrong, we fix it. But life gets lived between the doctor's visits. So you go there, fix the roof leak, and then you live. But what does that actually mean? And there's the thing. Now comes the systems, right? You're working in this thing, you all said it, you can't sleep, you eat the wrong thing, because the systems are not interested in you. No system is interested in its constituents. It is interested in containing itself, whatever that means. And so nobody pays attention to the actual people. Now we're saying, okay, you need to pay attention to yourself. That's actually not that easy, right? Because all the pressure from all this thing that doesn't really care about the individual is telling you, be faster, be this, be more, and you can't even breathe. So it's for me, a much more complex thing. And the thing that always helps me is curiosity, which is like, oh no, wait a minute. What's actually going on here? Who is driving this bus? Is there something I can do? If so, what would that be? Is what I'm doing supporting me? What part is supporting me? What is not? Is there something I can do? What is possible? And that's sort of like always the question behind the question. As a pathologist, I always kind of look at, okay, what's behind it? This whole thing, as you were saying, normal. Well, normal is not normal. Normal is just like, okay, we just take a whole bunch of people and then take whatever is currently presenting, which is getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So the more sick we get, the more normal everybody is. So you have the normal lab values, but you're sick.
No, I think that's beautiful because you mentioned the curiosity, which is really kind of dampened so much in our life. And then what's right for you? I don't even know what's right for me because I don't really know. No one's really taught me. And then when they say, oh, just do this, think positive, do this, how? What does that even mean? And then the normalcy, when someone goes, yeah, I get aches and pains, and I say, I don't have aches and pains, so that can't be normal. I think that's beautiful. Dr. Larry.
Well, obviously, there's lots of issues here, so trying to select one is difficult. But I'm kind of old school, and and I'm still a believer of move it or lose it. That we've become so sedentary. Again, taking a historical view, if you take a look at life a generation or two ago, how much more active they were than we are. And what scares the bejeebers out of me is looking at our kids today. When I was a kid, I was running around playing ball, playing hide and seek, and so on, playing kickball, baseball, and so on. And today I see my grandson and other kids sitting on their keister playing video games. They're not even moving at 6 or 7. What are they going to be at 67 and so on. And so often I try to enlist men, particularly senior men, to consider doing something like yoga and moving, and they go, you can't believe the things that I hear. Oh, that's for women, or no one does, or some of my favorites that I'm too stiff to do yoga. Okay. I remember I had a case where this guy, was probably 150 pounds overweight, and he was coughing and this and that and so on, but he was drenched in jewelry and so forth. And I said to him, have you thought about your health and about, being more active? And he says, no, I have to work, and so on. I need to make money. I said to him, you're well on your way to being the richest guy in the graveyard. And at that point, he kind of looked, and it actually was a turning point where he started to think more about it. I was fortunate since I worked, since I was my own boss, that I could go to the gym, every morning before I went to work, and it's done, wonders for me, and so on. So.
Excellent. That's great. Excellent. I like that because even the people when they're young, they're not even moving.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Elena, give us a couple of seconds.
Yeah, of course, everyone shared, and it is great insights. What I can add to what we already discussed, that the opposite of knowledge is ignorance, right? And the ignorance, what I mean here, that we are many people ignorant about themselves. They don't know who they are. They don't know potential that they have. They don't know how rich they are having the mind and how they can use it to create any results in life. So most people are creatures of habits, right? Like some routines and habits that they learn from their parents, they just continue doing the same things again and again without being thoughtful, yes, about results that they get. And nowadays the speed of life is so fast that people hardly can sit 5 minutes in silence. Just find in 5 minutes, if you tell them find 5 minutes and sit and don't think about anything, like just be in silence and just let your mind be quiet, like let your nervous system relax and connect to yourself and listen like listen your own ideas, because we live in such a highway, like if we look at this as a picture highway with 6 lines and cars goes different directions, and every day everyone is bombarded by thousands different ideas and all so much information, and people became like robotic. They just running like on the treadmill, and many at the same exactly place although they think that they're running, and they hardly know about themselves, and they hardly find time to be with themselves and put themselves as priority and understand really who they are, what needs they have, mental, physical, emotional. A lot of thoughts are suppressed, and when the emotions are suppressed, it causes depression, and depression causes disintegration. So many people not knowing how communicate well, how speak openly, how even being themselves. They can look for pleasing people, feeding themselves for somebody else's expectations, and this all brings more load on them, and this is can be the reasons why they get sick.
Well, this is great because the next question is a great segue from what you guys have been talking about. So now the third question is, what role should personal responsibility and healthcare professionals, businesses, communities, governments each play in creating a healthier society? Is there a possibility for balance? So why don't we start with Madeline this time?
I believe it's solely the individual's responsibility. I think we must educate people to stop putting the responsibility on governments, on businesses, on the healthcare, on outside sources, and it starts with them. That's where the divorce between themselves and who they become is actually happening, because they're not taking responsibility for themselves. They go to the doctor, it's the doctor's responsibility. They go to the office and the business must do it. And I see it because businesses get me in for the employees, and employees don't want to spend that money paying for a session with me, but the employer must pay for the session with me, which is fine, but it also means they don't take the responsibility. It becomes harder to drive them to be self-sustainable because they don't pay for it. And I put it solely at the foot of each individual. We need to go back to ourselves. We need to take responsibility for ourselves, and we need to start to become one with ourselves again. That's the only way I see us moving forward. Technology is going to become better. It's going to become faster, and it's going to affect them more if they do not become one with themselves.
Yeah, that's back to the disconnect talking about earlier, and the self-sustainability, and the fact that if you don't have the investment in yourself, meaning I'm paying, then I'm not as motivated. So I see that a lot too. Sabina.
Well, I don't think it's that clean, and I don't think it's just the individual that is responsible. I think it's all of us. Yes, it is my responsibility to live my life to the fullest that I was given. And I am still part of systems, governments, businesses, countries, where the opportunities may not actually be as easy as it sounds. Oh, you just need to be more clear with yourself and take more time for yourself and do all these things right so that you don't become a burden on society. Yes, that's nice, but it's not the individual's fault because the systems, the businesses, the government is not interested in the individual's health. Systems never are. So then it becomes actually extremely difficult for the individual to do this. However, to change the systems, that could be the individual's responsibility to say, okay, we do need to change this, and I'm going to do this because I am going to be the best I can with my life force, with my energy, with what I am given. And then there is the systems, the businesses, the healthcare systems, that their responsibility is to actually take care of the individuals. So it's, as you were saying, it's not that easy to know what you actually want. I was like, okay, what do I actually want? I ask this my clients all the time. They have no idea. They can give you a solid list of what they don't want, but they don't know what they want. Hard to change something if you don't even know where you are, why you are, because you are loyal actually to a system that you don't even know you are loyal to, and you're trying to kind of change everything when that's an impossibility in some ways. So I think it's a bigger problem, and I think it lays on all of us and the individual.
Very good. Excellent. Dr. Larry.
Well, I totally agree with that. There's multiple responsibility here. Certainly, the government, to put in, certain things we ought to do. I'm a firm believer, that it's important we vaccinate babies and things of that kind of nature, and that certainly has led to the extended lifespan. But at the same time, obviously, personal responsibility is also key, and I see that lacking so often. We have the stigma of mental health even to this day. See a shrink, talk to a stranger about my problems. Are you kidding? And so on. So there's still a lot of that, and people aren't addressing their issues. I like to say that the guy hears a little sound in his truck transmission, and he immediately runs to a transmission shop and says, "Hey, we got to fix this." Meanwhile, his marriage is falling apart. He's angry. He's over drinking, and someone suggests maybe you ought to see somebody. What are you? I don't need to do that. Well, where are your priorities?
Very good. Excellent. Priorities. Michael, you just joined us. Why don't you give us 30 seconds introduction, and then I'll repeat the question. Tony, why don't you give us your ideas and thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of self-responsibility, that you really need to seek information out there. Nobody will take care of yourself but yourself. But at the same time, we know, just for example, there are, like, we call the healthy food deserts out there. I live in the Bay Area where we have tons of healthy foods, kale and all these organic stuff. But we do know there are environments out there, there are some communities out there that all they have is a lot of fast foods. And so the healthy foods are not within their grasp. And these are where communities and governments and businesses are important in our lives, because we want to be able to make sure that healthy food is accessible for everyone. And when it comes to environment, I was in Vietnam 2 years ago and in India last year, and the amount of pollution in these areas. I was in Delhi and I have to wear a mask every single day, starting from the airport and into the hotel lobbies. And it's so sad and depressing to see how people live every day in and day out, breathing this type of air, living in this condition. And we don't have to look far. We have fires nowadays where we are suffocated with fires coming into our community. And so this is where government is also responsible for a lot of things, making sure that we have environmental laws to help our environment, pollution. And we want to make sure also, as Dr. Larry was saying, that vaccines, now that measles are erupting in so many communities and other things. And so I do believe that we all collectively, as Sabine would say, that we all collectively are responsible for each and every one. We can't have the mentality of, I will take care of myself or somebody else will take care of me. But at the same time, we have to think about healthcare as a community.
Well, as I'm listening, if I am able to understand how to take care of myself, then that's how I can transfer that to the community. Because if I can't take care of myself, it's difficult for me to even have the idea of how to even help these systems change. So, and I like it. So it's not just a simple, black, white, right or wrong, or, good or bad. So I think having this holistic view of this is very healthy for us. Elena.
Yeah, so when we speak about responsibility, I would like to share my perspective about this, that I learned this principle in my life and it helped me so much, that nobody is going to save you. This is what I learned. And when I learned this, that nobody is going to save me, I have to take control and I have to take responsibility for my actions today, right? And how to solve the situation, how to protect myself, protect my family. And it also not about health in other areas of life, because when we have this attitude that if something is going wrong, somebody will save me, right? And if we think that responsibility is on somebody else, it means that we will not act the way how we would act if we believe that we are responsible, right? Because this is choices, what we eat, activities, physical, mental activities, was what we do, and emotional, yes, communication, to really knowing that it is us who are responsible. It helps us to prevent so many problems in the future. So I think this is a great principle to live in, because it was time when I thought that I am a victim. I had so many challenges and I was finding myself that I am victim, please come help me. Like I was thinking that there should be somebody to help me, and there was nobody. And that my life taught me, just you are powerful. Instead of looking for outside, look in yourself, what God gave you, this ability to take care of yourself, to take care of your family. You can bring this power, you can discover that power, learn what you don't learn, be smart, learn, and rely on yourself. And when we have this attitude, we will feel that responsibility. And this means that instead of blaming people or blaming circumstances or situations or government or medical system, we can think what we can do better to be in a better place.
Perfect. Michael, did you get your microphone working?
Hopefully. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, we can hear you. So give us 30 seconds of introduction and then I'll repeat the question.
Okay, many apologies for being late. A little problem with the time zoning today, and I had clients in. So yeah, I've written 3 books on the frequency healing and holistic health area called the Frequency Healing Series. We research, this is Keep Health, we research the most advanced technologies in terms of frequency and energy healing. We also research the research, so we analyze the clinical data behind that and pick flaws out from normal clinical studies, but also especially from the frequency area. So we've got a job which is research, educating the public, supporting early adopters of these technologies with training and support and things like that. And yeah, that's broadly it. But we also specialize in certain technologies, things like electrical adaptive stimulators. But we then study the whole area and we integrate some of the best technologies, which are not just energy healing, but regenerative. So helping the body to get back to its state before an illness, an injury, or even an emotional trauma took place. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Perfect. So the question is, what role should personal responsibility, healthcare professionals, businesses, governance communities play in creating a healthier society? So give us 2 minutes.
I think it's all down to us because everything has been so heavily memeified, so oversimplified. Everything that there's so much of that on social media, which is horrifically misleading, actually. In addition, we have, I believe, very, very significant problems in the clinical studies and in the medical profession because everyone, the clinicians in frequency healing, were all taking the studies as they are. And, I think the people to reference here are Richard Horton, the former editor-in-chief of The Lancet, and Marcia Angel, former editor-in-chief of the New England Medical Journal. And I can't remember which one, but basically saying that as much as 50% of the clinical studies are either outright fraud through publication bias or fundamentally flawed. We've then got AI acting as an amplifier for that as well. So this is a very significant problem. And we've also got, masses of evidence of, multi-million dollar fraud from the pharma companies as well. So that makes a very complex situation for people to deal with. And I believe that the best thing is, given that we can't trust the data that we're trying to predicate our assumptions on, we need to go back and we need to question that. And we need to adopt a completely different approach in a way which is opening up our minds to all voices, seeing who's saying what, because it's increasingly a political world when someone's sticking their head above the parapet as a doctor or anything else and saying something which the system doesn't agree with. And the way I look at it is, well, those people have demonstrated a level of competence, but it's also, that's a brave act. That's a big thing for a doctor to stand out against the system. And those people should be given at least a hearing. So we should be trying to understand what they're trying to say. And then we have to really open ourselves to all data and go back and go, well, does that make sense? What can I verify from this for myself? Where are the patterns and pictures occurring? And ultimately, we're into a position where if we can't rely on the data around us, there's only one person we can rely on, and that's ourselves. So we have to adopt an approach to that, because otherwise it's our health, it's our life, it's our families. And there are, typically in terms of pharma, this is treated as a cost of doing business. So those CEOs of organizations where, potentially thousands, and I can't remember, it's one of the main medical associations in America, basically said iatrogenesis, which is death or injury by medicine, is the third leading cause of death in the US. So it's a very, very significant number. And on that basis, it's down to us. We need to face those realities and open our minds, get questioning, get researching, and not necessarily just operate on dangerous assumptions.
Yes, it's amazing because I've read certain books where they'll say this particular study had 19 people, and now they're saying the whole world that's the norm. Because it's amazing what you, and then when you see the source, these people are recommending this, but if you look at the source, they benefit from it, and these people are recommending something else. If you look at the source, they're benefiting from it. So you really have to start keying in on certain aspects of the information. Yep. Where is it coming from? Is there a hidden agenda? And what does that mean for me? Excellent.
Yeah,
okay,
and
let's go.
When did we ever see a CEO of a pharma company jailed for fraud or for, a public liability damage? They'll get fined billions potentially, but that's the cost of doing business. So we need to recognize that.
Yeah. Okay, the question number 4. What do you believe is one of the biggest misconceptions people have about preventing chronic disease and protecting their long-term health? So what kind of assumptions do you think deserve to be challenged? So why don't we start with Sabina on this one?
Well, one big assumption is my labs are fine, I'm okay. Complete
Mm,
nonsense. First of all, we were talking about the normal values and how that's basically just a reflection of all the people in your community where you've taken the test. And maybe if it's a really sick community, your medium is very high. And so that means absolutely nothing. Number two assumption that is kind of associated with it is like, okay, one test of something doesn't mean anything. So our focus is always on like this one thing at data, something that we can put our teeth into. But what we really never really look at is a kind of a trajectory, because that's not where things go. We can't really grab that. It's not, you can't make money off of this. It's all kinds of interesting things that go into this. But we don't really know. We don't ask questions about what happened 10 years ago, what was going on. We don't ask a lot of questions about the environment in which any kind of patient, any person really came in, or, oh, I developed this thing at this age. Who in your family had this happen at age whatever, other than trying to look for genetics? So there's a lot of assumptions that one biopsy in time, one test or something will give us meaningful information. That's one big bias that I have. It's like, that means absolutely nothing.
mm, excellent. Very good. Tony.
Two things. One is self-care is not selfish. And sometimes people think that self-care is going to a spa or getting your nails done. But self-care is more than that. Self-care is really looking at yourself. What are you eating? What are you doing? And what other things that you do for yourself. And the other thing is, I always teach about resilience, and resilience is not just about bouncing back for something that happened to you, or being tough, or continue to pushing through things. As Elena mentioned earlier, sometimes resilience is just taking a quiet pause for yourself. Sometimes taking a time to give your brain a little break, not think about anything else, but doing a little bit of meditation and being mindful of what you eat and what you do. Being resilient sometimes is telling yourself, like, I need to take a vacation, or I need to turn off my laptop at the end of the day and go to the gym. It's always going down to the basics of what you eat and doing some movements to take care of yourself. And again, that quiet time that we always take for granted, that we think that we're lazy if we don't continue to move, or that we feel guilty that we give ourselves a break, and that the break is needed. We're not machines, and even machines sometimes needs a break, or they,
Yep. They get reset.
they get, yeah, exactly. And so, especially for our body is so delicate when you think about it. And as we get older, we need those moments where probably need to take naps. We need, Europeans are very good, right, in doing siestas and taking a break. So take those vacations, take those break times, and take the time to get your needs, and take the time to get healthy food. I know sometimes fast food is so easy to just go into the drive-through and get the food. It's harder to go to a grocery and pick up salad or fruits and things like that. But these are the things that we really need to be responsible for ourselves, and that we can do for ourselves.
Excellent. Dr. Larry.
Well, I think the biggest misconception from my perspective, being a senior here, is that I sense that too many seniors just give up. I've heard it many times. Who am I trying to impress? How much more time do I have? and so on. I'm going to eat this donut because it feels good. I know it might be not good for me, but it's one of the few pleasures I have left, et cetera, et cetera. Go to the gym? Are you kidding? I'm 80. Who goes to the gym at 80? And so on, and such. And from what I'm seeing, that's a real problem with the senior population. And by the way, our media promotes that. When's the last time you saw in Hollywood, an elderly couple, being amorous? That doesn't happen. It's like there's a rule after 60 years old, you don't show people, being, making love and so forth. That's only for young people. And so again, that's what I'm seeing a lot is seniors saying, so what? And of course, that's a vicious circle. The more you do, the more you think that way, the more you do that way, and of course, it has a bad ending.
Yeah, several people have talked about what are the possibilities. I had an uncle at 93 put in a complete hardwood floor by himself in his home. So it's not age. And if someone actually knows about that, really? So no. And all these little things like your eyesight gets worse and all this stuff happens, and that's not true. But unless someone actually sees someone that is outside what the system says is normal, they don't know that the possibilities are even there. Elena.
I believe that one of the biggest misconceptions is that our health is mainly something that we deal with when something goes wrong. And we often wait for symptoms, a diagnosis, or a health crisis before we start paying attention. But long-term health is being shaped every single day by the small decisions we repeatedly make. How we eat, sleep, move, manage stress, and even how we think. And this is where mindset becomes so important. Knowing what is healthy doesn't necessarily mean we will do that, right? So many people know that what they have to do, but there is such a big gap between what they know and what they do, right? Because they just creatures of habits, they just do what is easy. And nowadays people are so addicted, right? Like so faithful to do easy things. And we all know that what is easy today in long term it will be something that will be more difficult. So people prefer to think what is better today, what is the fastest, what is the easiest. This is how people prefer that eating that fast food instead of cooking and spending time and prepare really great nutritious food for their family. So we can have all the information in the world, but if our habits, beliefs, and identity don't support that knowledge, we often return to familiar behaviors. So for me, prevention is not only about knowing what to do, it's about becoming the person who consistently makes choices that supports their future well-being. And health isn't created only in the doctor's office. It's created through the decisions that we make every day.
Perfect. Excellent. Michael.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, I think it's important for people to know that, research takes place at the margins, and there's actually quite deep evidence in certain areas for the potential to resolve or cure or completely undo chronic illnesses. But this is not mainstream sort of medicine area because very, very few doctors, for example, use things like soft lasers. Well, they've been around for the thick end of 50 years now, and the regenerative effects for those devices are as long as you're on. So I think there's an immediate preconception, which is, it needn't necessarily be something that's incurable. Therefore, all these things are potentially avoidable as well. Back to the risk of pharma, which is, how many of us know, especially seniors who are on, 5 or 10 different drugs, and the chance of them being tested together is virtually zero. So the more we get into that with the background of the problems that we know exist in the clinical trials, the more we're randomizing our results with chemical cocktails into the body. So on that basis, I'd be looking, at very, very basic things, but also the understanding that we have a problem with our food supply as well. So this is length of time of food arriving from farm to table, toxins in the food chain in terms of pesticides and herbicides and things like that, and effectively demineralization of the soil as well. So we need to make sure our body's having the correct inputs, because we know that's incredibly powerful. There's a shed load of data for the vital importance of a correctly mineralized body, especially minerals, because they have such a long-term effect in the body, but also vitamins. And then we need to understand that, one of the problems is the petrochemical industry has been reproducing these minerals from sources which are completely unnatural as well. And it's not quite the same, it seems, as, magnesium that you get from a plant source or something like that. So it becomes a little bit of a minefield. We need to then either take some kind of full spectrum supplements, or and make sure they're bioavailable and good quality, or alternatively target towards what we're trying to deal with. So a lot of these things are quite fundamental. The problem is these little complexities that arise along the way in terms of misleading marketing, misleading data, things like that. And understanding that, there's a genuine risk from mixing too much pharma stuff together. I'm absolutely not negating the vital importance and role of the medical profession and doctors here, because, they can save your life. Let's not be, dust over that point. They can absolutely save your life, but we need to bring a discernment into our lifestyle decisions. And the fresher the food, the more local the food. If we can grow in our own garden, or even some microgreens in a pot on the windowsill, something like that, and then consider supplements and stuff. So those would be, my solutions to those kind of issues. And I think a lot of people think that they can't do anything about it.
I think it's interesting, because when I was in California, there were certain fruits or stuff that it was okay. And then when I moved to Costa Rica, I said, well, I really like this. Who knows, like the soil, the nutrients in the soil, or the way that they grew it, or the pesticides. So when someone says, I don't like something, so, well, have you had it from this place where it grows natural and they don't have all those other things added to it? And that's one of the things I realized. And then the fact that you've got all these other things, the EMFs and the electrical stuff that's going around, people were having pains, and then they moved to another location and the pain's gone. And they didn't do anything. So there's all of this other stuff going on. Madeline.
I still believe through the people that I see that our emotions are making us sick. It starts there. People think that what we eat, if we eat well and we exercise, that's where it ends. And it's not where it ends. And that's one big misconception, is who am I at the end of the day? Do I attend to my negative thoughts, my negative beliefs, my trauma wounds that's never been attended to? Because that anger, resentment, and bitterness in the heart, I've seen it making people sick and causing all sorts of problems. I've seen how a bitter heart can affect the kidneys. And I've seen emotions that's been built up over years causing people to overeat, because they into their comfort food just to fill the void that they're in. So there's a huge link between mind, body, and soul, holistic therapies, holistic options, as well as the medical profession. But people tend to stop at the eating well and exercise, and then they think now they're healthy. And that's not where it ends. And that's why we often see a sports star or a person in your family or friend circle that's very fit. They go to the gym, they play tennis, they do this, and drop dead overnight. And we can't understand what happens. And it's because the emotions are neglected.
That is such a big piece of it, because someone was talking earlier about just pause. Well, I have people that I know that had such a traumatic childhood. Pausing is not even a consideration for them because they had to be 100% on alert. 12 o'clock and all is well, 12:15 and all is well. It's almost like a clock inside them. And so telling them to pause, unless they deal with what you were talking about, those traumas or whatever happened earlier. And if you have a person, well, they eat healthy food, yeah, but it's too much. It's the same thing, right? They have organic, really nutrient-rich food, but they're eating because of this coping mechanism that they have happening. So that's why I love this conversation here, because it's all the different perspectives and angles. It's not just one thing. And that's why you want to be able to have someone that gives you this broad perspective. And when we use the word holistic, we're talking about look at the studies, look at your trauma, look at your emotions, look at the body, look at the mind. Are you stressed? It's like all these things together. And it can be inundating for someone to just start today. It's like, well, so what time do I have to get up? 3. Well, if you want to do an hour of meditation, an hour, yes. And that's what happens. It's like they're too much. So you just do little pieces. Well, why don't you just take a 10-minute pause? Why don't you just eat one thing healthy? Why don't you just all these little things, and you slowly integrate this stuff. And then as time passes and you realize, wow, I've changed and we use the word lifestyle. So let's go to our last question here. And it is, what single change would create the greatest long-term benefit for individuals and society? And that's kind of how I segued into it, because it's overwhelming. So what would be something that people could take away from today and start making a difference? Tony, why don't we start with you?
I'm a firm believer of knowledge is power, and learning about yourself, sometimes even before you go out there, learning about yourself is, what does my body need? What does my spirit needs? What does my mind needs? And there's so many information out there, as we talked about earlier, but really giving yourself the time to educate yourself about healthy foods, the things that you can do for your body. There's so many modalities, whether it's yoga or running or Reiki, energy healing, whatever it is that, try to learn all of those, try to learn things. And, our mind is, we don't want it to be stagnant. We want to keep expanding our minds and learning about things. And when you also learn about these things, sometimes it's also expands your community. Like when I learned about yoga, I have a community of yogis that I met, and through the community of yogis, I learned about sound healing. I learned about Reiki, and so it just not just expands your mind, but it also expands your community. And to me, community is so important because it gets you out of your house. It gets you out of your comfort zone. And sometimes there are beliefs out there and things that will challenge you, that that is out of the norm, but at the same time, it gives you a different whole perspective. And as Michael would say, just learning about all of the other modalities out there, all of the other ideas out there, and you decide for yourself what works for you. As you said earlier, Vangelis, it's like take little steps. It can be overwhelming, but at the same time, if you don't take the step, you don't get anywhere. So just maybe changing one habit at a time. Maybe, if you're needing more sleep, just taking some of those small steps, as putting your phone down at night so that the light is not disrupting your sleep. So again, taking small steps and learning. To me, I especially when I was going through grief, I consume books on grief because I wanted to understand what I was going through. And so the same thing is anything in your in your life that you want to learn. Books are out there, and there's so many mediums of learning out there.
Perfect. Madeline, what's one thing people can take away from today that could help them on their way?
I believe the single greatest change to move from unconscious living is to conscious living. People become more aware of what they think, what they believe. They will become more aware of how they consume, how they cope with stress, and who they surround themselves with that gives life meaning in their lives. To me, it's all, I wrote a program called I Am Possible, so exactly teaching them that, is to become conscious in everything you do, how you react, how you speak, how you eat, and everything else. And I believe that, to me, is the way of moving forward, is kind of become from unconsciousness, move into consciousness.
Perfect. So being deliberate in your choices, deliberate in what you're doing, deliberate in how you move forward. Excellent.
Yeah.
Dr. Larry, one thing.
I certainly second what Madeline is saying. Becoming self-aware and so on. I might add to that, be open to seeking some assistance appropriately. As I said before, so many people are fearful of that. And of course, I've said it now several times, I still am a firm believer of move it or lose it. Become more active.
Excellent. Excellent. Sabina.
Well, for me, it's be curious about yourself, because nobody is coming to rescue you. And what does that mean? Curious is not a commodity, it's an actual state of openness of, okay, is what I'm doing really helping? What else could be there? And this could be movement, this could be food, this could be sleep, this could be asking yourself a very uncomfortable question, getting some outside coach, therapy, friend to talk to about, getting a reflection of, ooh, for me personally, it was like, wow, I didn't really realize that by being completely overweight and addicted to sugar, I was loyal to my family system, and it had nothing to do with food. Nothing's changed. Diet change didn't change. None of this stuff actually really helped me, because I was really much more loyal to being like the people in my family than all these things that I had the knowledge with. That didn't actually help. But the curiosity of, why am I consistently, and why is this working for everybody else but not for me? That was the thing. If you're not curious about yourself, nobody else will be.
Excellent. Excellent. Michael.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up from Tony's point on knowledge is power. That's the root of it for me. I think the next step is know yourself as well, because you need to know something about your programs or your natural unconscious reactions to make that conscious. I also think that we need to process information in a different way, and very often people associate learning with school. And I hated doing algebra, and I hated doing this. Well, it needn't be like that. Whether it's a good book or it's a great video off YouTube or something else like that, find a starting point that resonates with you, that you enjoy, that enriches you in some way, and then start to jump around and try some other stuff. Because if it's fun, then we're going to give it a go. And, when it comes to sport or something like that as well, it doesn't necessarily need to be the gym. Find something you enjoy. It could be something, relatively sort of low impact, like bowls or something like that. But, get moving, get started, find other things, explore, treat life like an adventure. It should be fun. And if we do that with our sport, with our learning, with our social life, etc., then we're enriching as well as learning, and it needn't be a chore.
Excellent. Excellent. Elena.
If it would be one thing, I would connect it strongly to personal responsibility. It would be move from reactive healthcare to proactive healthcare and proactive health ownership. So when we consider, as we have the asset or bank account, right, and everything what we do, we invest instead of spending. So when we invest, when we choose food, we invest when we choose circle people who we communicate with, because we don't want to be among toxic people, right? So, and every decision is investing, and imagine that it would be taught, yes, like in schools to people from early age, that health is something that they actively create every day, not they just address a doctor office. And that means understanding nutrition, movement, sleep, stress, but also understanding our minds, yes, like our beliefs, our habits, our emotional patterns, and the environment we create around ourselves. So I believe that education is critical because people cannot take responsibility for something they don't understand. Yes, but knowledge alone also isn't enough. We need to help people turn knowledge into daily behavior. And as I already said, that we are creatures of habit, so it is should be like introduced to children as part of their daily routines, how to love themselves, how to respect themselves, also how to have big goals, because having big goals gives people this motivation and also inspiration to be healthy long enough to achieve those goals, right? So
Excellent.
yeah, so if you could create a culture where the people don't ask only how I do treat this problem, but also what can I do today to protect the health I want 10 or 20 years from now, that would be a great change.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for your candid responses, your contribution to today's topic, and I trust all of you watching and listening were able to have something that caused a shift of an idea or perhaps perspective that allows you to benefit in some way regarding how you take care of your health. So from all of us here in the Circle of Fame, thank you for joining us. Any last words, Elena,
Yeah, of
to
course.
close us out?
Yes, it was amazing discussion. I enjoyed sharing and listening everyone, and I believe that people who hear this also will find so much value. And thank you so much, everyone, for your great contribution to this panel and creating the World Expert Knowledge Hub, which we are going to build all together and build that impact for a long time to come.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.